It is the great realm of the Gwaith-i-Myrdain, the jewelsmiths of the elves, most famous of craftsmen since Feanor himself. While its history would span for less than 1,000 years, it would have a lasting impact on the history of Middle-earth, and in one version of the story, include a revolt against Galadriel herself. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the history of Eregion. After the lands of Beleriand fall into the sea at the end of the First Age, many of the Noldor who both survived and chose to remain in Middle-earth settle in the newly established realm of Lindon. Aside from a few small islands off the coast, these lands are all that remain of the former Beleriand. They are led by Gil-galad, now High King of the Noldor after the death of Turgon in the fall of Gondolin. As the Second Age gets underway, many of the Teleri, survivors of Doriath and Osiriand, would make their way east to establish realms among the Sylvan elves. However, we would also see Noldor leave as well. One of the earliest to leave is Galadriel, with her husband Celeborn. She would leave her grandnephew Gil-galad's realm to dwell near Lake Nanuiel. Yet there was another notable citizen of Lindon, Celebrimbor, the grandson of Feanor, creator of the silmarils and greatest craftsman to ever live. After some 700 years in Lindon, Celebrimbor and many other Noldor leave. They are drawn eastward not by ambition to rule their own land, but by the promise of the Mirthril being mined by the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. In 750 of the Second Age, these Noldoran elves establish the realm of Eregion and begin to build the capital of Ost-in-Edhil, which means Fortress of the Eldar. Ost-in-Edhil lies near the Siranon River, many miles downstream from the west gate of Moria. A great friendship forms between the dwarves of Khazad-dûm and the elves of Eregion. They not only live in peace with one another, but they trade freely, with a high road running from Ost-in-Edhil to the west gate of Moria. Among the elves, Celebrimbor leads a guild of craftsmen called the Gwaith-i-Myrdain, the people of the jewelsmiths. Their work was so marvelous, it is said to be the greatest since the time of Feanor himself. The Myrdain also work directly with the dwarves. It is Celebrimbor himself who helps the dwarf Narvi to build the Doors of Durin. From Mirthril, the Myrdain are able to create Ithildin, the substance used to create moon runes, which reflect the light of the moon and stars. As Tolkien states, the elves and dwarves had great profit from this association, so that Eregion became far stronger, and Khazad-dûm far more beautiful than either would have done alone. But Tolkien goes on to mention in Unfinished Tales, news of these things came to the ears of Sauron, and increased the fears that he felt concerning the coming of the Númenóreans to Lindon, and the coasts further south, and their friendship with Gil-galad. And he heard tell also of Aldarion, son of Tar-Meneldur, the king of Númenor, now become a great shipbuilder, who brought his vessels to havens far down into the Harad. Sauron therefore left Eriador alone for a while, and he chose the land of Mordor, as it was afterwards called, for a stronghold, as a counter to the threat of the Númenórean landings. When he felt himself to be secure, he sent emissaries to Eriador, and finally, in about the year 1200 of the Second Age, came himself, wearing the fairest form that he could contrive. After raising his stronghold of Mordor to combat the threat of Númenor, Sauron makes his move against the elves of Eriador, fearing a great alliance of men, elves, and dwarves. After being turned away by Gil-galad and Elrond in Lindon, he comes to Eregion, where under the guise of Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, he comes to befriend the elves. Like Gil-galad and Elrond, we are told Galadriel does not fall for this fair visage of Sauron. And this is where things get interesting from a canon perspective. In Unfinished Tales, we get a version of the text that seems to imply it may have been Galadriel and Celeborn who actually founded Eregion, presumably leading them until Annatar's presence creates a rift. In this version, we find that Galadriel perceived the Dark Lord stirring in Middle-earth as early as the year 500 of the Second Age. This is what leads her and Celeborn to make their move east, for Galadriel believed this residue of evil could only be fought by an alliance of all its enemies. Here we find that Annatar spends 150 to 200 years influencing the Gwaith Myrdain, all while returning Galadriel's scorn with outward patience and courtesy. Finally, between 1350 and 1400 of the Second Age, he moves to expel Galadriel, convincing Celebrimbor and the Gwaith Myrdain to rebel against the Lord and Lady. And here we can resume what is the more clear-cut version of events. Galadriel and her daughter Celebrimbor leave through Khazad-dûm, coming to the elven realm of Lorinand. Celeborn, who was not fond of dwarves, no doubt due to their race's role in the fall of Doriath, stays in Eregion, where he is largely ignored by Celebrimbor and Annatar. After centuries of Annatar's tutelage, the Gwaith Myrdain forged 16 great rings of power, and around 1500, Sauron leaves Eregion, making his way back to Mordor. Meanwhile, Celebrimbor and his jewelsmiths use their newfound knowledge to create 3 more rings, without Sauron's knowledge or involvement. These 3 rings are completed around 1590 of the Second Age, and just 10 years later, Sauron forges his 1 ring in the fires of Mount Doom, made to bring all other ring-bearers under his sway. However, the moment Sauron puts on his master ring, he and his treachery become known to the elves bearing the 3. Celebrimbor, who was not corrupted in heart or faith, but had merely accepted Sauron as what he posed to be, immediately revolts against Sauron. He travels to Lorinand, seeking once again the counsel of Galadriel. Galadriel in turn says the rings should be hidden, never used, and dispersed far from Eregion, where Sauron would believe them to be. Thus, Celebrimbor gives to Galadriel Nenya, the Ring of Water, which she would keep for all her remaining days in Middle-earth. Vilya and Narya are sent to Gil-galad in Lindon, with the Ring of Air being kept by the king, and the Ring of Fire kept by Círdan the Shipwright. Upon learning of Celebrimbor's defiance, Sauron discards his fair visage, taking on the form of cruelty and power he would use to drive his armies in war. In 1695, he leads his host out of Mordor, marching north to Eregion. This attack would come sooner were it not for the 2 blue wizards, who worked against him in the east and south. Thus, his recruitment in these lands did not go as smoothly as he hoped. Still, he would come to Eregion with great force, as Gil-galad sends Elrond to reinforce their fellow elves. Celeborn leads an initial sortie out of Eregion, driving back the vanguard of Sauron's host. Celeborn would then combine forces with Elrond as the latter arrives. However, Sauron's main host would come, driving them back and surrounding Eregion, cutting Celeborn and Elrond off from Ost-in-Edhil. The capital would fall in 1697. Celebrimbor makes a valiant last stand on the very steps of the House of the Myrdain. He is taken captive and tortured by Sauron, leading the Dark Lord to take possession of the 16 rings. However, Celebrimbor would tell nothing of the 3, which Sauron coveted above all others. Celebrimbor dies from his torment, and his body is shot with orc arrows. Sauron then has his body placed on a pole and used as a banner as they turn toward the host of Elrond. Elrond's forces would have been destroyed were it not for the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, who attack Sauron's rear, diverting his attention and allowing Elrond, Celeborn, and the survivors of Eregion to escape north, where they would establish Rivendell. The doors of Durin are closed, and the host of Sauron would destroy Ost-in-Edhil and ravage not only Eregion, but most of Eriador over the coming years. While the War of the Elves and Sauron would rage on, the realm of Eregion would be no more, dying along with its lord. Despite its demise in 1697 of the Second Age, the effects of this elven realm would be felt to the very latest days of the Third Age, not only in the Rings of Power and their role over the centuries, but in the land itself. Over 4,700 years later, the Fellowship of the Ring would pass through the former lands of Eregion on their quest. Now widely known as Hollin, we see the very land speaks of the elves who once dwelt there.
We cannot look too far ahead. Let us be glad that the first stage is safely over. I think we will rest here, not only today but tonight as well. There's a wholesome air about Hollin. Much evil must befall a country before it wholly forgets the elves, if once they dwelt there.
That is true, said Legolas. But the elves of this land were of a race strange to us of the Sylvan folk, and the trees and the grass do not now remember them. Only I hear the stones lament them. Deep they delved us, fair they wrought us, high they builded us, but they are gone. They are gone. They sought the havens long ago. The Fellowship travels for many miles on the now broken and decayed road that once led from Ost-in-Edhil to the very doors of Moria. A stark reminder of these great realms that once were, the friendship that thrived between them, and the evil that befell at the hands of Sauron. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.